morning, everyone.
Hey, good morning, Kristen. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well. I just realized you said good morning to everyone, but it's a webinar, so people can't respond to you. In the first split second, I said, "Hey, why don't I respond to Kristen?" Because that would be the polite thing to do.
That would be polite. Awesome. Well, we'll get started here. It looks like people are rolling in. Welcome to our first coffee chat of 2025. Thank you for starting your day with us. My name's Kristen, and I'm on the marketing team here at Aqueduct. And I just wanted to note that today's call is being recorded. We wanted to keep this coffee chat interactive, so if at any point you'd like to ask a question, just make sure you type it into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to get those questions answered. A quick note before we get started, AQ is hosting a special event with our partner Palo Alto next week. It's going to be on Tuesday, the 21st at the F1 in Seaport. All are welcome, so feel free to bring a coworker to join you. I'll share more details at the end of the session. But without further ado, Rick, the floor is yours if you'd like to introduce yourself and your co-host for today.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. I'm looking forward to F1. I can't wait to get behind the wheel of that thing. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Chat 2025. I'm so excited to kick this series off. I am joined today by Chandler Bissett, who is an amazing person. You got to give a background about yourself because you just started here a little while ago, but already making your mark, and we've worked together so long. I was so excited when you came aboard. But give a little background about yourself.
Oh man, thank you, Rick. First of all, thank you kindly for the warm introduction. Yeah, I've done a couple different weird things. I've spent some time in the defense sector. I'm a prior service combat veteran. I have spent some time at Cisco Systems, at Pure Storage, uh, both in leadership and as an individual contributor. As a technologist, I've spent some time in the beverage industry. As you can clearly see behind me, I have a problem with collecting a whole bunch of sneakers. I just really enjoy getting to interact with people at all times of the day, drinking coffee for what it's worth. We'll get into that in a little bit. And I like helping people solve big problems. And when I get the chance to work with Rick in previous lives, side by side, and now hand in hand, it's a good day to wake up and get to work.
Yeah, your passion for technology is so intoxicating. I love it. Talking about coffee. I mean, coffee chat. This is the where we're going. I thought I was very passionate about coffee, but I have been humbled by your coffee knowledge. So what do you got today?
Well, look, it's the number two consumed drug on the planet, right? Right
Yeah,
behind
yeah, yeah.
tea. Um, and I think when you put it in that construct that we've all got the weird things that we're into. I'm just kind of into coffee, right? So there's a coffee roaster out of Providence, Rhode Island called the Coffee Connection. They roast daily. They roast hundreds of pounds of coffee daily. And insofar as coffee is the freshest when you can consume it closest to its roast date. And just like in Black Hawk Down, when Grimesy said, "It's all in the grind, Sarge, it's all in the grind," he is absolutely correct. So the roast and the grind are the most important thing to getting an incredible cup of coffee. So I have a full city roast, which is like a right fastball down the middle, medium roast.
Mhm.
So it's got a good amount of body, good amount of structure. It's from Honduras. It's a single origin, and we are a fresh print or a not a Fresh Prince household. We are a French press household. So we French press every day, and that's what I've got going on. Super, super delicious. I absolutely love it, and it just gets me going. We're also a one cup house day. This thing is, I tested it about 6 months ago. There's almost 400 milligrams of caffeine in one cup. So that's a mess, a whole mess of caffeine. And so we do one cup, and my cardiologist is like, "Yeah, you're good with that.
Yeah.
Let's relax. Let's relax." What do you got going on, Rick?
So I'm flat white today. My wife, so we're a Breville family.
Yep.
And so we started with this coffee. This is a Costa Rican single origin. Bones and Co. Is where we do our coffee. Again,
Hmm.
we have the subscription service. So my coffee has training wheels because I like the cream. And I can't. I've tried. so many times to do the black or the espresso, and
Yeah.
yeah, I struggle with it. And I love coffee, so it's funny. But I always talk about having the training wheels on mine because I have to have some foam or some cream or something in
Look,
it.
there's no training wheels, right? I love flat whites as well. I think I like flat whites more than lattes. I think flat
Yeah,
whites
oh yeah,
provide a lot more body and structure to the coffee, and it doesn't flood the flavor of the espresso the same way a latte would.
yeah,
And it's okay. Like, however, same way I very famously said this, a whole mess of people have heard me say this about whiskey. The only wrong way to drink whiskey is to not drink whiskey. I think the same way when it comes to coffee. I think the only wrong way to drink coffee is to not drink coffee. However, you want to consume it on a daily basis. If you're like our friend Kristen, she she told us that she has to set up timers to not just drink a whole vat of it throughout the day. That's okay too. It's a like I said, it's a wonderful drug that we consume on a daily basis, and it helps us get through with what we've got going on. I mean, as we're kind of going to get it into, the tech landscape and the sophistication is dialed way up. The complexity is dialed way up. And so if we need a hot beverage every now and then or a cold beverage, like in New England, because iced coffee is supreme, to help us with all of this stuff, I mean, what's wrong with that?
yeah. And anybody that's on this call knows in tech, whether we drink our coffee hot, whether we drink our coffee iced, whether we have some kind of cappuccino or flat white with it, we all drink coffee. And if you don't drink coffee, there's some other caffeinated beverage
Yeah.
in the arsenal. I've worked with a lot of Red Bull folks, and I've worked with a lot of Mountain Dew folks, and there's still some kind of caffeinated boost in it. I think you have to have that, when you're in this industry.
Yeah, there are a couple unicorns out there, and my hat's off to you. You know who you are, and if they are on the call, again, just my sincere gratitude and admiration to your ability to get through the 24 hours without any type of caffeine. Just tell me your
Bless you.
secrets. Yeah, tell me your secrets. How do you do it? I
Yeah.
cannot. You're stronger than I am, for
Yeah.
sure.
As we jump into it, you mentioned something about the complexities of 2024. Man, what a fascinating year.
Yeah,
We
wild
saw
year.
so much going on. We'll talk a little bit about AI, but I haven't seen a buzz like that in a long time,
Hmm.
when in the industry. And we tend to get excited about these things. But for the first time, I felt this is different with AI.
Hmm.
Both, being in cybersecurity, I'm excited about it, but also there's an adversarial effect and you got to kind of balance it. But to me, I look at it as the tool that I've been looking for. So when you go in the toolbox and you're like, where is that? Where is that thing? And with AI, whatever construct it is in, um, it's really here to stay, and it's really going to benefit us. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I don't disagree. I think a couple different things there. I think the maturation process of not just the application, but the infrastructure that supports the application kind of hit a tipping point where a lot of different people can now play in that space and they can add value. I think we saw a lot more well-defined use cases come to market to where my words, not anybody else's, the parlor trick aspect of it is kind of we've jumped that shark, so to speak. And then finally, to your point that you had made earlier, we're getting a lot better at defining the compliance and the governance and the controls aspect around security for how we can put reins around this thing, or at least guardrails, so to speak, understanding that this is not going away. So what are we going to do to weaponize this and to make this a part of our tech stack and our landscape, either both personally or professionally, right? And are we cool with the risks? Have we made our bed, so to speak, with the risks that this introduces, with all of those things in mind? Um, yeah, it really is wild. Uh, Not to mention all of that, just the organizations that pop up seemingly overnight with, "Hey, here's my AI use case," and then you peek
Mm,
under the hood. It's like you're a GPT model with an API.
yeah,
Like, are you okay?
and your own
Okay.
UX that you developed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay,
yeah.
fair enough. Fair enough. I'll hear you out. But Yeah, I think the efficiencies in whatever market that those applications or those organizations are trying to introduce to a customer base, to an organization, to whatever, I think it's more incumbent upon customers and resellers alike to vet those for their customer bases to ensure that they're getting into the right places for the right reasons and not just we're not just hitting another tech bubble, so to speak, where it's all flash, no substance, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
agreed. And I do agree that I think folks in the beginning jumped on it a lot with the private. You just all, the shiny object, right? Everybody got excited. But now when we look at it and we talk to our customers, we have customers building private models. We have customers building, in Copilot, right? In that area with Microsoft. We have folks doing things with the chat GPTs and all of those models, whether it's 4.0 or whatever the model is that makes the most sense to them, and they're taking it. And I also think one thing that is great, you were talking about the governance piece of it, is making sure you're protecting your intellectual property, that you don't have, you got to have some kind of DLP, because you don't want people uploading your intellectual property into an open forum and now it's not your intellectual property anymore because it's in the wild.
Oh my God. I mean, how many times have we seen that? You talk about the tumultuous, turbulent nature of 24. How many times do we see a gripping headline? And like, that's the really interesting thing for me when it comes to headlines is you could reverse timeline it, right? You had like the Samsung use case that everyone loves to talk about that was all over professional Facebook. That's what I call LinkedIn because that's kind of what it's turned into, right? Like, oh, they uploaded a patent that became fair use because it hit the GPT model, right? When did it happen? Like it happened here, and then we got to walk back. Was it 6 weeks ago? Was it 9 weeks ago? Because that's when journalists got a hold of it. Yeah, I think in the same vein, you can't get a little bit pregnant. You can't
Mhm.
untrain a model once it knows something. You have to. It's very, very difficult to unteach and unlearn things. It's not, you're not in a courtroom and the judge, you can't just like wave a wand as a judge and be like, disregard that testimony. It,
Right.
it just becomes a very, very precarious situation. And we're all still learning, right? We're all still making mistakes. The pace of innovation is certainly outpacing our ability to put any type of compliance model around this. And as we know from our at least in the United States, as we know from our ability to legislate and put laws around this, we will certainly the pace of innovation will outpace any ability to put a real instantiated legal boundary around this, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not confident in that whatsoever. So it's up to the technologists to kind of figure this out for right now, I guess.
Yeah, TBD. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens in 25, right? Well, what they're going to do with the laws and what they're going to do for guidance and governance and
Hmm.
all of those. Um, Want to shift gears a little
Yeah.
off the AI, but kind of the same, because these large language models are going to have a lot of compute, right? And we've been seeing the proliferation of quantum computing. People have been trying to figure out ways to do it. I do believe that is the next evolution of web scale, right? So when we see those and all of that, that's the cloud services like the AWS and the Azures and all of that have made that. To me, this feels like, okay, we're gonna need banks of RAM, we're gonna need banks of GPU, we're gonna need banks of compute, right? And a lot of it,
Hmm.
you know, and this quantum computing evolution is going to take us places we can't even dream to see what they're like.
Yeah. Interesting point. I think so. I remember, let's like wind back a long time ago. I remember when MIT published that we have the first quantum computer, functional, it's processing, and it's at 10 megahertz. I remember reading that article. I was in the military at the time, and I was sitting there like, wow, quantum computing. I had no idea what the hell it was. No idea, right? Uh, just not even a little bit. But I was like, this is really interesting. It's not x86 architecture. It's I understand what the words quantum and computing are, but I don't know, like, I certainly don't know what they mean together.
Yeah,
And then fast forward many years later, like even in the security space, quantum computing has accelerated the ability to brute force passwords,
exactly.
right? What used to take trillions of years from an x86 architecture is now accelerated that 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold, right? I think it's interesting you bring up the web scale portion of it. We don't know, or at least I'm not aware of what quantum computing is going to turn into. I really like how you kind of position, or you pivoted from AI architectures into quantum computing. I think they both are so new and they're so undefined. Like we haven't even begun to hit like the base camp of the mountain in both of those pieces of technology. I think they're going to be so complementary. We've joked for years, once James Cameron made Terminator, like everyone's been worried about Skynet for so long. I think the coupling of those two technologies might literally be the instantiation of Skynet. Yeah, I think that might be wild. Um, if for no other reason, it will introduce us to a scale of computing that we've never seen before. Because as it is now, we look at computing as just a faster way to run applications. But
Mhm.
but quantum computing opens up not only a faster way to do things, but a reimagined way to do things,
Mhm.
right? I think coupled with that, we are running out of space and power across the globe. That like even the quantum computers we have today are literally run by, private power grids. So at the scale that we have x86 today, we certainly couldn't replace it with quantum computing unless we figure out a new power requirement or a new way to power them. But that's one thing I think Europe understands better than we do. We seem to have like an infinite supply of power. At least we don't talk about it the way they do. But you go into technology conversations in Europe, the first thing they want to talk about is how does this thing you want to talk to us about sip power?
Mhm.
Whereas we're just like, yeah, I mean, look, NVIDIA just announced the Blackwell architecture a couple days ago at CES. The new 5090 is 575 watts TDP in one
Mhm.
card.
Right.
That's wild.
Right.
That is wild. The new DGX is based on that. Good Lord, dude. You're gonna need like a municipality to power those things. I don't know. It's really, really interesting. I think to answer the question directly, I think it does have some ramifications long term in web scale. I don't think we're gonna see it short term, but I think we're gonna need some really, really new ways of thinking to take that, I would say, incredibly bleeding edge technology and apply it to the way we think about that tech stack today. Because it will be, it's almost like going from the early x86 architecture to where we're at today. Like no one could have seen that. And then that shift into whatever the hell quantum is. It's wild to think like in 20 years, I'm going to have a quantum computer sitting on my desk, maybe subatomic computer sitting right there.
Did you see NVIDIA announced the Triton that was like he wants to build that supercomputer? It's
Yeah,
like I'm like, are you kidding me? That
all
yeah, I
to
mean
play
it's prototype
Minecraft,
now,
dude.
but it was like this. It looked like a VCR. It was like
Mm-hmm.
holy amazing. And you brought up a good point too, and the sustainability, right,
Yeah.
of being able to do that. We can't have all of the power shifted to just these data centers, right? You got a sustainable power source. You got to do all these different things. I'm um excited that both administrations have addressed it. The outgoing Biden administration, incoming Trump, is both said that they're going to look at those, and they've set guidelines to understand, so we just don't get too excited and start building these large data centers
Yeah.
that can't be sustained, right? I was interesting to watch Microsoft say they're going to invest $1 billion into nuclear power for quantum and AI. It was like,
Well,
okay.
yeah. I mean, I know that nuclear's been kind of like the scapegoat for a very long time as far as like fear, but it's one of the safest and cleanest power sources on the planet if you protect it and you do all the right things,
Mm,
right? If you pull the power or you do all the wrong things, bad things happen. Now, what I'm not saying is I'm I'm a nuclear scientist by any means, and I have all the right answers. I totally get that. It's far easier for me to make that statement than it is to understand the complexities of protecting the full solution as like a nuclear power plant. But the long-term viability of nuclear power, when you treat it correctly, there's plenty of other uh, nation states across the world that have proven the safety of nuclear power and the long-term viability of its cleanliness and its ability to power some of these things. I think that, that's just a non-issue now. Whether or not people can rally around the fact that they have, uh, a Simpsons-like power plant in their backyard, I think that's a very, very different comment.
Yeah. And I have
Um,
seen these large, so where I live, there is a Amazon distribution facility. It was actually at the old Lucent plant,
okay.
and the plant is probably 120,000 square feet. But the solar farm, it is the
Yeah.
coolest thing I've seen. Like it has to be acres of solar farm powering that. And it's just, I don't know, I could just look at the solar farm and be like,
Yeah.
this is amazing, how this whole thing, is working to, power this plant. I think that's, those kind of things are going to be part of it, right? So it's not just going to be nuclear, it's going to be all of these different things together to
Hmm.
have that sustained power. I think, there's going to be multifaceted grids for these data centers coming up, the old, two prong electrical grids, it still will still be there, but those electrical grids aren't going to be traditional.
Oh, and
They're
it's such an interesting point. It's not just the grid's responsibility to have sustainable power feeding. I think it's also the component's responsibility uh, to figure out a way to use less power, right? The proliferation of inexpensive flash and reducing the moving parts within the storage fabrics across these data centers. Like all of the major storage vendors have figured out a way to have very inexpensive flash storage frames and to provide, I would say, a very enterprise grade data services within those storage frames to where the cost of flash has come down to spinning disk levels across almost every major storage vendor to the point where it makes a lot of sense to start getting that into those archive use cases. Tier one and tier zero use cases. Now, every business is different and um, I would say every buying decision is different. So I'm not going to make this like broad brush statement, but the use case for Flash in those silos has been apparent for a very long time. But archive has been like that low hanging fruit because it's cheap and deep and spinning disk works, but it chunks a lot of power. But you can put Flash in those workloads now, and that brings the power envelope a lot down, a lot further down. And then coupled with more efficient power delivery systems on the grid edge, so to speak, I think everybody shares the responsibility in figuring out a way to use less power across the globe, irrespective of us right now seemingly having unlimited power. But I think it's going to catch up with us at some point,
mm,
and maybe it is when we figure out a way to to micro architecture quantum, uh, and we start getting it in some of these smaller devices. It is
yeah, you
wild.
mentioned.
I apologize. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you mentioned the high speed storage. We're seeing that proliferation of people pulling that archive data back,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Taking it from the cloud and putting it into the data center and keeping it close to home because they're finding, again, I'm going to tie it back to the large language models. They're finding that data that they have archived can be used for those models, right? So they're like, well, it's not going to do me any good in the cloud. I need to pull that back into the, so it all ties in, right? It's
Oh
all
yeah.
amazing how both in 24 and 25 that these technologies are all complementary. When you look at them in separate lanes, you're like, wow, there's a lot going on. But then when you start streaming them into each lane, you're like, wait, this makes a lot of sense. The AI, the quantum computing, the way that storage is, and the high flash, and just like it's to me, again, I don't want to get too passionate. I get excited. It's amazing time, for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. When it really when people realize that I would say AI architectures or AI ready architectures, and I think maybe that's it more than anything. We've had a lot of conversations with our customer base that, maybe we don't have a well-defined use case internally. Maybe, we've staffed our internal teams, and I'm kind of speaking under the auspices that this is what our executive leadership teams and our customers have kind of talked to us about or tasked us with. We've had conversations internally that we're not ready today, but when we are ready or when we have that well-defined use case, we want to be ready. So what would a good infrastructure look like? What does good look like today? Well, to your point, you've been pushing terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of tertiary backup data or tertiary, we don't care data, air quotes, into a hyperscaler for a long time. Here's some very good reasons about why you need that on premises. Ah, crap. Okay, let's bring that back. I mean, you can leave it there too for that, hit the button moment when you may need it there. But even restoration and data retrieval speeds have a lot to be desired when you're
Mm,
coming back over the cloud. And because of the proliferation of, I would say, speed optimized flashed, I think that's the nice way to say it. Yeah, you need that back in your four walls. And to power like RAG or retrieval augmented generation AI models, some other models out there that maybe don't have a very well defined use case, but rely on an incredible amount of data, like all of the data that you have to collate everything that you've got and just feed the model just
mm.
everywhere it is. Yeah, I think it's a very well met point that you brought up that wherever you've got it, your data scientists are going to need it, and then they're going to come back and say, "Hey, we need more." And you're out there that you've been stuffing this data everywhere for years and years and years and years and years. Just bring it back. Just bring it back home, man.
Yeah, we've had these discussions. You could get
Yeah.
limitless, right? You could
Yeah.
get limitless with AI and all of this stuff, and you get in the cloud, and then you get a bill of a couple $1 million, and you're like, oh, bringing it back puts the guardrails on it and keeps everything in a defined space, kind of controls, cost, kind of controls power, kind of controls all of those components. We see that, and then me in the security mind, I'm not a fan of limitless, right? I
Hmm.
love keeping things in guardrails and keeping my edges defined and keeping, all of that stuff, in a nice little bow, from there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then as we kind of morph into 25, everything we talked about that we saw at 24 is going to accelerate more
Yeah.
in 25. Is there any technologies that you see on the horizon that's going to be different in 25 that we haven't seen so far and kind of proliferate, giving all the announcements and everything?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the jester in me wants to say this is the year of Linux desktop. This is not the year of Linux desktop. I think, the we'll say that for the next 40 years. I think we will start to see more and more data gravity issues, meaning we will see more and more services being pushed to the edge. I think, NFV was a provider issue for a very long time,
Hmm.
meaning how can the CDNs and the service providers and just how can we embolden and galvanize the provider edge to wherever a customer needs a thing, we can have that thing at the edge and not have to wait weeks to deploy those services. I think more and more will continue to creep into the enterprises in the same way that we saw, 15, 20 years ago, we saw a lot of provider technologies creep into the enterprise.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is, 30 years ago, Token Ring started as an enterprise grade technology that came in, or a provider technology that came into the enterprise, and then it was MPLS, and then we'll slowly see those things come in. I think we'll see more and more services being pushed to the edge on the networking side. Um, I'm not sure if you're familiar. So Cisco is getting ready to launch. They've, I'm pretty sure they've made the announcement. They're getting to push a whole bunch of security services right down to the port, like
Hmm.
a whole mess of security services right down to the port. And I'm being purposefully broad, and obtuse because I'm not exactly sure how much they've said, and I want to keep my job, so I'm not going to be explicit. Uh, Suffice it to say, they are uniquely positioned because of their portfolio that they can push a whole bunch of security services to the port level. And this is something that they've done for a very long time, coupled with DNA Center and ICE. That was a really, really good story. I think executing on it becomes very difficult because of the sophistication and complexity we talked about at the beginning. I think that will start to get turned way up. I think with their Splunk acquisition, and Gary Steele really driving the unification of those teams as the go-to-market president, that leader of that entire group, he is going to drive a lot more unification for what that looks like. And I think we'll start to see other people follow suit. The I don't think the Justice Department has signed off on it yet. Not the Justice Department, but for the FTC, whomever needs to sign off on it. But the Juniper and HPE acquisition, once that happens, I think same thing. We're going to see a lot more services at the port level to where it's not just enabling an Ethernet fabric. Now, what can we do from the security level? What can we do from a collaboration perspective? How can we get more to the edge? And if you remember from, I would say 3 to 5 years ago, this conversation started with data gravity. How can we get the data closer to the customers where they need it, which all started as an NFV conversation from providers. Like Netflix was sending out CDN boxes to all their service providers because customers had a bad user experience because they wanted to spin up an episode of something and it was buffering and it was taking too long. So same thing, those provider level technologies eventually get down to the enterprise once the provider kind of fixes and works everything out. I'll even go one step further. ISIS, while for most network engineers is a technology that they have to learn to pass a certification exam, I would argue it is one of the best routing protocols, if you can call it that, one of the best ways to interconnect devices because of how simple it is. That is now starting to find its way into the enterprises for interconnectivity technologies. In that same way, it's just simplifying things and trying to drive down sophistication while also reducing complexity, but things are just getting more and more and more and more. This coupled with what we just talked about with data and some of those application use cases, I think the more we can get down to the port level and to provide those services where people are. And when I say port level, I want to be super clear as well. I'm talking physical or virtual in the form of Wi-Fi, the better. So people can have a better experience, whether they're here, there, regardless. Does that make sense the way I'm thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up Netflix, and I smiled because they literally defined service edge.
Yeah.
And they built that model. And then manufacturers and companies were like, well, we should put security on it. Hey, security service edge, and then it was born. And I always look back to those early CDN providers like Netflix to help us. You were talking about data gravity and, moving the data back and forth and all of that. If it hadn't been for organizations like that with that need and all that, they saw it from there. We always see these technologies emerging and these architects emerging, and they're one of them. And you were talking about, ISIS, what's old is new again. I think it's funny how we just keep shifting these things around. The one thing I wanted to bring up as, we start wrapping up, that I think is important, and it kind of ties into all this, and we look in 25, I think legacy, the hub and spoke VPN kind of networks are going to be kind of being phased out. The always on VPNs, like the Cisco Secure Access, Prisma Access, Zscaler, ZPA, all of that are going to be just, the basics. Do you have a firewall, right? It's all going to go back to that. You're going to have that. You're going to have to control that. That's how you're going to be able to keep your information intact and understand where those data streams are and what's going on from there. You'll be able to better understand the user experience. You'll be able to understand the performance of your environment. Right. So when we're talking about sustainability, now you'll be able to see, hey, I've got X amount of users logging into this application, and this is what's going on with it, and be able to adjust accordingly. Kind of brings that, you brought up the Splunk thing, the visibility thing is going to be key. and
Mm-hmm.
then adding intelligence to that, now we're going to be able to, operate our networks, kind of, Tesla-esque, or pick any EV that you want. Yeah, because I feel like the EVs, and you're an expert at this, is, it's software with wheels, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think networks are going to get like that. We're going to be able to understand where our users are doing, what's happening. It's going to, back to the AI model, is going to kind of give us, hey, you're starting to see a trend where there's going to be an issue with this app. How much is this app going to cost if there's an issue, right? How much for your transactions? You're going to need to understand that. And we're going to be able to see that in real time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we've had that for so long at the lines of business, but that hasn't made it down to in my estimation, like to keep the lights on infrastructure stuff. Once we hit like peak IT enterprise supportability, getting to that infrastructure as code, I think yeah, you're spot on. When we get to that level of observability, when we get to that level of cost determination, uh, hopefully organizations have at the right size, right? We don't want to process for process sake, but we get to that point where chargebacks are instantiated not from a ha 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 ha, you owe me this kind of money, but from a realization in the business that these things do cost money because there's value to them. So, no, you can't ask for a VM with 96 cores and 5 TB of RAM to run your DHCP server because there's cost and value associated to it. Then, yeah, I do completely agree with you that um, a lot of those things have to be brought in because of the sophistication and the complexity these things are driving, because we do need to decouple a lot of the software and the hardware. And we've seen so many organizations do this in the past that were probably a little too early. Like even like NVIDIA bought Cumulus.
Hmm.
Cumulus was a science experiment for a long time. Now, I will say it was an amazing piece of technology that was it was too new. Like you launch Cumulus today, I think it spreads like wildfire. And
Hmm.
I think that's why NVIDIA picked it up because they saw this completely met their organizational goals were, where they were trying to go in. I think even then knew they were going to have to eventually transition over to an Ethernet fabric because at that time they were only InfiniBand.
Hmm.
Um, Same thing with Mellanox. Like Mellanox fit their strategy. We have to eventually get to Ethernet. Um, and then one thing that we haven't talked about that it just hit my head as you were talking, all of this is nothing without context. Like we have to be making contextually driven decisions for all of this technology, how we're going to use it, why we're making these decisions, and what outcomes are going to be to support our businesses and make those business level decisions. Because yeah, context is everything.
I totally agree with that. We see that with our engagements with customers. There's no more of, hey, I need SKU number, blah, 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 right? It's, here's what I got going on, and here's what I need to solve for. How do we get there?
Yeah.
And what we're seeing with customers too is, it's not like I need to do this in the next 90 days, right? It's, hey, I've got this 1, 3, 5 year plan. Let's take a look at what we got. How do we get there? And how do we take, these logical steps to get there so that my outcome gets reached? And one of the things we're seeing customers too, it's not a final outcome, it's staged outcomes. I need to get to here. So let's back up, reverse timeline, right? Let's go back and say, okay, by the end of 25, I need to have this done. 26, right? We've that the seeing enterprises, kind of morph into that has been, um I don't want to say a godsend, but it's how we think, right? So it's been really nice in that sense.
Yeah, you're 100% spot on. 100% spot on. Seeing the bigger picture, and not even, I mean, to be perfectly candid with you, a lot of the organizations that we help and our customers with us today, we participate in those conversations, but we may not necessarily support solutions in every single portion of those conversations, but we're still in the conversations. We're helping, guiding, and we're facilitating a lot of those conversations. But we it's no longer it's very difficult to be productive and to get ahead of it when it's siloed all of the time. The larger contextual conversations have to be just that. They have to be larger contextual conversations. The days of X does Y, A does B, C does D, I think more often than not, you'll find yourself never getting off of that treadmill, and it's very difficult to escape the why do we always feel behind?
Mm.
Yeah.
And the participants of the conversations, right? We used to be pretty
Yes.
narrow, and now we're seeing people that in the line of business that are using the technology, in 24 going into 25. A lot of my conversations have been on user experience
Oh yeah.
and customer experience, right?
Oh
Which
yeah.
is very, very important to these solutions. Before, earlier years, it was always, I need faster, I need faster, I need faster. And there was never any, why do you need faster? And now it's, I think we've reached that utopia where it's been like, okay, I need to do this. And it may not be faster, it's more efficient,
Mm.
right? And that's been an amazing thing to see. And I would expect we're going to see that more in 25 because as the perimeter diminishes, we're going to see more folks doing things all across the globe. And whether they're in, Eastern Europe or in Boston, Mass, they're going to want the same experience,
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
that. They don't care. They're geographically away from, I have X amount of time to get X amount of done, and I want to be able to do it in that time.
Selfishly, I just hope they call us.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, this is a great conversation. We're running short on time. Looking through, make sure we covered everything. Yeah, Q&A. I'm looking. I don't see a lot in there. I don't see anything in there. That's fine from there. But this is a great conversation to talk about what we've seen in what we've seen in 20, what we're going to see in 25. As we wrap up, what do you want to leave the folks with as far as how you feel about 25?
I'm incredibly excited about 25. I don't want to like Apple people like this is the best iPhone ever. Well, yeah, it's the newest iPhone ever, right? I'm probably more excited about 25 than I have been in a while as it comes to technology enablement. I think we have well-defined use cases in market that meet real business challenges. I think AQ, has a well-defined ability to capitalize and capture those use cases. And more than anything, I believe in our ability to be incredibly creative and drive a lot more thought leadership in our data in our cloud and AI practice here at AQ. I'm very, very excited. I mean, we've been a networking security company for a very, very, very long time. We excel at that. I mean, you are almost solely responsible. You and Matt Albrecht and a bunch of the people on the security side are almost solely responsible for that. I'm very excited to show people what we've been doing with the data, AI, and cloud space, and I can't wait to get out there and just talk about it.
Yeah,
I just really can't.
it feels like excitement. And I've said just to you privately, the excitement for 25 just feels different, right?
Yeah.
Just with everything going on and stuff like that. Yeah, this has been a great, great conversation. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us for our initial episode here. We're definitely going to have Chandler on, more. I got you and I could talk all day long, and
We could.
we
We
we were
could.
we were told with guardrails to make sure that we keep it. And I've been really good at trying to keep us on time because you and I could just talk for hours, and then people are like, they won't be, they
We'd
won't be
both get
mad.
fired if we did that, but that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
No, you
Um,
guys did great.
yeah,
A wild Kristen has appeared.
yeah. How's your iced
Yay.
coffee? Is it done?
Oh, it's almost there. I couldn't set
Yeah.
my alarm. It would be distracting. All right. Well, thank you, Rick and Chandler. That was such a wonderful conversation. Your knowledge combined with your banter is very refreshing. Um, it made for a great conversation to start our morning. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. I'll be sending along a follow-up email. It will include the recording as well as a link to register for that F1 event I mentioned at the beginning of the session. And that's in Boston on Tuesday. If you do think of any questions as we conclude, don't hesitate to send them over to me, then I can get them over to Rick and Chandler. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.